Sirius would have loved this. I should have been there. I should have saved you. Something's wrong. Something's here. Who's there? Show yourself. This is the Department of Mysteries.
You saved me! Why? Protego! Nice one, James! No, Sirius. You let him fall. You let him die.
I know. I see it every night.
It was my fault. I led them there. I should have known it was a trap. He came to save me, and I watched him die.
Not real. You're just my guilt.
But that's not what Sirius would want me to feel. He died protecting me. He died doing what he always did, fighting for the people he loved. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you were born from my pain. Let go. Rest now. Sirius? Hello, Harry.
Sirius, I'm so sorry.
I'm so proud of you, Harry. So proud of the man you've become. Your parents would be proud too.
Thank you. I love you, Sirius.
You're gonna be alright, Harry. You're gonna live and love and fight for good things. That's all I ever wanted. I'll make you proud. I promise. You already do. Remember, Harry. You are loved. You are not alone. Thank you, Sirius. I'll keep going. For both of us.
I hope you enjoyed the Harry Potter short film we created for you. It may have been brief, just a glimpse really, but behind that tiny scene lies a whole, quiet world of emotion one we poured our hearts into bringing to life. And tonight, I'm going to share the full story with you. Every whisper of magic, every snowy corridor, every echo of the past that Harry faces. Creating that short film and this bedtime tale took a lot of time, love, and late-night effort from our team. So, if you truly are a Harry fan at heart, please consider supporting our channel, subscribing, and letting us know in the comments where you're watching from. It really means the world to us. Now, since this is a sleep story, I want you to get comfortable, settle into your blankets, soften your breathing, let the worries of the day melt away. In a moment, we're going to step together into Hogwarts on a quiet Christmas night tonight when Harry returns to the castle not for classes or quests, but because something deep inside him is calling him back. A night where the snow falls gently over the towers, the great hall glows with warm candlelight, and the corridors hum softly like an old, familiar lullaby. And somewhere in those long, empty halls, Harry will come face to face with a shimmering crack in the air, and a memory he has tried so long to outrun. So close your eyes if you'd like. Breathe slowly, and let the magic of the story guide you. Are you ready? Alright then, let's begin. Harry Potter and the Echoes of Christmas Past. Harry had not expected to spend Christmas at Hogwarts this year. Yet something had pulled him back, a magnetic tug in his chest that he could not name or dismiss. It was a homesickness not for the Burrow's warm chaos or Hermione's parents' tidy sitting room, but for these ancient stone corridors, for the particular smell of candle wax and old parchment, for the way the castle settled into itself when the students, departed and left only silence and snowfall under. Faint hum of enchantments woven into every brick and timber. He had arrived, alone on the evening of Christmas Eve, his trunk light, his heart heavier than he cared to admit. Now the great hall stood empty behind him, its long tables cleared, its enchanted ceiling reflecting a sky thick with falling snow that drifted past the high windows in lazy spirals. The house elves had decorated with their usual enthusiasm garlands of holly and ivy wound round the columns. Enchanted icicles hung from the rafters catching the candlelight, and a magnificent fir tree stood in the corner, its branches heavy with silver baubles and golden stars. Harry walked the corridors with no destination, his footsteps echoing on the cold stone. Each sound was a small percussion that seemed to travel further than it should, as if the castle were listening, as if Hogwarts itself were a living thing that breathed and remembered and held within its walls every joy and every sorrow that had ever unfolded beneath its ancient roof. The candles flickering in their iron sconces cast trembling shadows that danced along the walls. Harry found himself thinking of all the Christmases he had known here, the laughter and the feasts, the friends gathered close, the warmth that had filled these halls even in the darkest times. Yet tonight the warmth felt distant, separated from him by a thin membrane of memory and regret. It was as though he were watching those happier times through frosted glass, able to see them but unable to touch them, unable to reclaim that sense of belonging he had once felt so keenly. He passed suits of armor standing silent vigil, their metal surfaces gleaming dully in the candlelight. He passed portraits whose occupants had retreated to other frames or dozed in their gilded sleep. He passed doorways that led to classrooms long closed for the holiday, their interiors dark and still. Through one window he glimpsed the forbidden forest, its trees heavy with snow, their branches bending under the weight like old men bowing beneath the burden of years. The castle was not entirely empty, of course. Somewhere in the kitchens, the house elves would be preparing tomorrow's feast with their usual fervor. In the dungeons, potions would be brewing themselves, their surfaces bubbling gently in the darkness. In the headmistress's office, Fawkes might be roosting on his perch, his crimson and gold plumage bright against the shadows. But these presences felt distant to Harry, removed from his solitary wandering, and he found a strange comfort in the isolation, as if only in this emptiness could he finally confront the fullness of what he carried. Inside Dotted was in one of these forgotten stretches of corridor, a place he had walked 100 times before without notice that Harry felt the air change. It was a coldness that was not the ordinary chill of winter, but something sharper, thinner, a fissure in the atmosphere that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand and his breath catch in his throat. He stopped abruptly, his hand instinctively moving toward his wand. The corridor seemed to hold its breath along with him. Then he watched as the air itself seemed to crack, a blue-white luminescence seeping through the fracture-like moonlight through a broken window. The sensation that washed over him was achingly familiar, a magical vibration that resonated in his bones and brought with it the memory of another night, another loss. The terrible moment when Sirius had fallen through the veil and Harry's world had shattered into pieces he had never quite managed to fit back together. The crack widened slowly, deliberately, as if whatever lay beyond was testing the barrier between worlds. From it emerged something that defied easy description, a wraith woven of grey-black mist and fragments of memory, its form shifting and unstable, its surface rippling with images that flashed and vanished before Harry could fully comprehend them. He saw Sirius falling, mouth open in surprise or perhaps laughter. He saw his own face twisted in a scream of denial. He saw Bellatrix's cruel grin, her one still raised in triumph. He saw the stone arch and the tattered veil that swayed though there was no wind. That threshold between life and death that had swallowed the closest thing to a father he had ever known. The wraith wraith did not speak in words, but seemed to hum with a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the corridor, a breath of sorrow that filled the space between Harry and the apparition. As it reached toward him with a hand that was not quite a hand, more a tendril of smoke and grief, Harry felt his body begin to tremble. Not from fear, he realized, but from the weight of recognition. The familiar heaviness of guilt that had lived in him for so long it had become a part of his identity. Inseparable from who he was, the wraith moved closer, and Harry could see now that it was not merely a shadow but a repository of his own pain. A manifestation of every moment he had replayed in his mind, every decision he had second-guessed, every path not taken that might have led to a different outcome. It showed him Sirius's face in the fireplace, calling him by his father's name, the hope and affection in those gray eyes. It showed him the Department of Mysteries, the moment he had rushed forward, heedless of warnings, driven by a vision that had been false from the start. It showed him the battle, the chaos, the split second when everything had gone wrong. He heard his own voice, barely a whisper, cracked and small in the vastness of the corridor. The words escaped him before he could stop them, words he had not allowed himself to say aloud in years. Perhaps had never said aloud at all. "I couldn't save you." The admission hung in the air between them, and the wraith seemed to feed on those words, growing more substantial with each syllable. Its features sharpened until Harry could see within the shifting mist the outline of Sirius's face, the high cheekbones, the dark hair that fell across his forehead, the eyes that had once held such warmth and wildness and now held only the echo of Harry's own pain. He understood then, standing in that cold corridor with his heart pounding and his breath coming in shallow gasps, that this creature was not some external threat sent to harm him. It was a manifestation of the things he had been running from, the weight he had been carrying, the voice that whispered in the darkest hours of the night. It was the "I failed" that had lived inside him like a curse, the belief that he was responsible for every loss, that his love was a dangerous thing, that those who cared for him paid the price in blood and grief. The wraith reached closer, and Harry could feel its cold touch like fingers brushing against his chest, seeking his heart. He knew with a sudden clarity that if he fled now, if he turned and ran as every instinct screamed at him to do, this thing would follow him. It would haunt him through all the years to come, would grow stronger with every new regret he collected, every new loss he blamed himself for, until eventually it consumed him entirely and left nothing but an empty shell going through the motions of living dots. So instead of running, Harry chose to stay. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a long, shaking breath that tasted of snow and stone, and the faint sweetness of pine boughs somewhere in the castle. His heart hammered against his ribs. His hands were cold, his fingers numb, but beneath the fear and the sorrow, he felt something else beginning to stir a small seed of resistance. A voice that had been growing quieter over the years, but had never quite been silenced. He opened his eyes again and looked directly at the wraith, at the face of Sirius that lived within it, at his own guilt made visible and tangible. The apparition's eyes met his, and in them Harry saw not accusation, but a terrible sadness, as if the wraith itself were trapped, bound to this endless replay of grief and self-recrimination. Harry steadied himself, planting his feet more firmly on the cold floor. When he spoke this time, his voice was quieter but somehow stronger, the words coming from a place deeper than fear or sorrow, a place that had been growing in him slowly over the years. A small seed of truth that he had been afraid to acknowledge. "It was not my fault," Harry said, and the word felt strange in his mouth, foreign and yet right, like a language he had forgotten and was only now remembering. "I was a child. I did what I could." The wraith shuddered at these words, its form rippling like water disturbed by a stone. But Harry pressed on, his voice gaining strength. "I was 15 years old. Voldemort manipulated me. He used my love against me, used my need to save the people I cared about. I walked into a trap. Yes. But I did it because I thought I could help. Because I couldn't stand the thought of losing someone else. He took a step forward, closing the distance between himself and the apparition. Sirius came because he loved me. He fought because he was brave. He died because Bellatrix Lestrange killed him. Not because I wasn't good enough, or fast enough, or smart enough. I've carried this weight for so long, telling myself that if I had just been better, been more, then he would still be alive. But that's not true. That's never been true. The wraith was fragmenting now, its form breaking apart into smaller wisps that drifted upward like smoke. Harry felt tears on his cheeks, but did not wipe them away. I loved him. Harry continued, his voice breaking. I loved him, and I lost him, and that's a tragedy. But it's not a crime I committed. It's not a debt I owe. It's just what happened. And I have to find a way to live with that without letting it destroy me. He said it again, more firmly, letting the truth of it settle into his bones, replacing the old poisonous certainty of his guilt with something cleaner. Something that did not erase the pain or pretend the loss had not been real, but simply placed it in a different light. A light that allowed for both grief and forgiveness, for both memory and peace. The grey-black mist was dissolving rapidly now, and where the darkness had been, something else began to form. A warmth and a brightness that started as a pinpoint of gold and expanded outward, taking shape into the silhouette of a man tall and familiar, made not of shadow, out of light and memory. The image grew clearer with each passing second until Harry could see every detail, Sirius as he had been at his best, young and whole and free. His face breaking into that reckless grin that had always made Harry feel seen and loved and safe. His hair was windswept, his robes slightly disheveled in that careless way he had always worn them. But his eyes, those grey eyes that Harry remembered so well, shone with warmth and pride and something that looked very much like joy. The apparition of light did not speak with sound, but Harry heard the words nonetheless, felt them as a presence in his mind. Gentle and sure and unmistakably serious. You did enough. Harry, you were brilliant. You've always been brilliant. Be at peace. Carry on. The words were a benediction, a release, a permission he hadn't known he needed. Harry felt something in his chest unlock, and what he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was there. Tears he had not allowed himself to shed properly now spilled hot down his cold cheeks, and he did not try to stop them. These were not tears of guilt or despair, but of relief, of a grief finally allowed to be what it was without the additional weight of self-blame. The apparition reached out once more, and this time the touch was not cold, but warm, a bright and transient heat that pressed against Harry's chest where his heart beat steady and true. The sensation reminded him of summer days and laughter, of the brief time he had spent at Grimmauld Place with Sirius, of the future they had imagined together that had been stolen from them both. I miss you, Harry whispered. I miss you so much. The light intensified, growing brighter and warmer, and though the apparition's lips did not move, Harry felt the response like an embrace. I know. I miss you too, but I'm proud of you, Harry. So proud of the man you've become. Don't let grief keep you from living. Don't let my death mean that you never allow yourself to be happy again. That's not what I would want. That's never been what I wanted for you. The light expanded until it filled the corridor, brilliant and warm and somehow peaceful, and Harry had to close his eyes against the brightness. He felt the warmth wash over him like a wave, felt it seep into his bones and chase away the cold that had lived there for so long. And then, gradually, the brightness began to fade, dimming slowly like a sunset, until when Harry opened his eyes again the corridor was empty. The apparition had dissolved like snowflakes on warm skin, leaving only the ordinary darkness and the flickering candles that had somehow relit themselves during the encounter. their small flames dancing bravely against the shadows. The air was no longer cold, but merely cool, the winter chill one might expect in a castle in Scotland in December. Nothing more sinister than that. Harry stood alone in the corridor, the stone walls rising round him, the portraits on either side still sleeping, the suits of armor still standing their silent guard. Yet everything felt different, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders and he could finally stand fully upright without the burden of all that guilt pressing him down. He touched his chest where the warmth had been, feeling the fabric of his Gryffindor scarf beneath his fingers, and he found that he was smiling a small and tentative smile, but a real one. The first in what felt like a very long time. The smile felt strange on his face, like a muscle long unused, but it also felt right, natural, as if this was who he was meant to be all along if only he could let himself. He walked on, his footsteps still echoing, but the sound somehow friendlier now, less lonely. The castle around him seemed to hum with approval, as if Hogwarts itself recognized what had transpired and was pleased. He found his way to a tall window that looked out over the grounds, and he stood there for a long moment, watching the snow fall in thick curtains beyond the glass, blanketing the world in white and softening every edge and corner. The view was breathtaking in its simplicity. The snow had transformed the familiar landscape into something new and magical, covering the imperfections and scars, making everything clean and pristine. The forbidden forest was a dark smudge on the horizon, its trees barely visible through the falling snow. The Quidditch pitch was a smooth white expanse, the goalposts rising like skeletal fingers from the drifts. And beyond, just barely visible, was the lake, its surface frozen and gleaming like polished silver in the moonlight that occasionally broke through the clouds. Harry pressed his palm against the cold window and watched the snowfall and felt, for the first time in years, that he might actually be alright. He understood now that grief did not have to be a prison, that memory could be a comfort rather than a torment. That he could carry his love for those he had lost without being crushed by the weight of it. The love remained, it would always remain, but it no longer had to hurt so much. It could be a gentle presence, a reminder of what had been good and precious, rather than a constant wound that never quite healed. The night stretched out before him, peaceful and still, and somewhere in the castle a clock chimed the hour, its sound clear and bright, marking time, but not rushing it. Harry thought of all the Christmases to come, all the years ahead, and he thought of Sirius and felt not the old sharp pain, but a gentle ache, a tenderness, the kind of feeling that meant love had not died, but had transformed into something that could be carried, that could be lived with, that could even bring a kind of quiet joy. He thought of his friends Ron and Hermione, who had stood by him through everything, who had never given up on him even when he had been at his worst, who had loved him not despite his flaws but somehow because of them, because they made him human and real. He thought of the Weasleys, who had welcomed him into their family without hesitation, who had given him a glimpse of what it meant to be loved unconditionally. He thought of Dumbledore, who had been flawed and human and had made terrible mistakes, but who had also believed in Harry when no one else did, who had seen in him not just the boy who lived, but simply Harry, a boy who deserved a chance at happiness. And he thought of his parents, James and Lily, who he had never known but who had loved him enough to die for him, whose sacrifice had echoed through his entire life and had shaped him in ways both beautiful and painful. He thought of all the people he had loved and lost, Sirius and Dumbledore and Remus and Tonks and Fred and so many others, and he understood that each loss had carved out a space inside him. But those spaces were not empty. They were filled with memory and love, and the knowledge that he had been lucky, impossibly lucky, to have known these people at all. Harry stood at the window for a long time, watching the snow and breathing in the cold air that seeped through the ancient glass. And when he finally turned away to find his bed, His steps were steady and his shoulders square, and his heart, though still marked by loss, was lighter than it had been. It was open once more to the possibility of peace, to the comfort of this castle that had been more of a home to him than anywhere else in the world, to the magic that lived not just in spells and potions, but in the ability to forgive oneself, to let go, to move forward while still honoring what had been. The corridor ahead was dark but not frightening. The candles lit his way, their flames steady and sure, and as Harry walked he thought of the wraith and the light, of the words that had been spoken or felt or imagined. And he knew that this Christmas, alone in Hogwarts, he had received a gift more valuable than anything that could be wrapped in paper and tied with ribbon. It was the gift of release, of acceptance, of the understanding that he had done his best and that his best, however imperfect, had been enough. The castle seemed to hum its approval. The ancient stones warmed despite the winter cold, and Harry pulled his scarf a little tighter and allowed himself to feel the full measure of his gratitude for this place, for this moment, for the strange and unexpected grace that had found him in a dark corridor and had given him back to himself. He made his way back to Gryffindor Tower, the familiar route imprinted in his muscle memory. He climbed the stairs that spiraled upward into the darkness, each step bringing him closer to rest, to the sleep he suddenly realized he desperately needed. He gave the password to the fat lady, who greeted him with a sleepy smile and a knowing look, as if she understood something of what had transpired, and he stepped into the common room that was empty and warm. The fire crackled cheerfully in the grate, sending dancing shadows across the familiar space. The armchairs were drawn up close for warmth, and the Christmas decorations the students had put up before leaving were still in place, garlands of holly, strings of enchanted lights that changed color slowly. A small tree in the corner covered with ornaments made in Transfiguration class. Harry felt a surge of affection for this room, for all the hours he had spent here, for all the laughter and the studying and the whispered plans and the quiet moments of companionship. He climbed the stairs to the dormitory, his footsteps soft on the worn wood, and he entered the room that had been his for so many years. The four-poster beds were lined up neatly, the curtains drawn back, his own bed waiting with its familiar blankets and the knowledge that he would sleep well tonight, that his dreams would be gentle, that the wraith would not return because he had faced it and accepted what it had tried to teach him. He undressed slowly, his movements deliberate and calm, and he slipped between the cool sheets and felt them warm against his skin. He lay on his back looking up at the canopy above and listening to the wind outside and the soft creak of the castle settling, and he thought once more of Sirius. But this time the thought brought not pain, but a bittersweet fondness, a recognition that love did not end with death, but continued, transformed, woven into the fabric of who he was and who he would become. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Hogwarts and the grounds beyond in a pristine white silence. The world was at rest, wrapped in winter's embrace, and Harry felt himself becoming part of that stillness, that peace. His breathing deepened, his body relaxed into the mattress, and he felt himself drifting towards sleep. That gentle descent into darkness that was not frightening but welcoming, a place of rest and renewal. As he drifted, he heard again the words that the apparition had spoken. Be at peace, carry on. And he knew that he would, that he could, that the future stretched out before him full of possibility, and that he was ready, finally, to meet it without the weight of the past dragging him down. He could honor those he had lost without being imprisoned by their absence. He could remember without being consumed by regret. He could love without fearing that his love would bring only pain. The castle round him was silent now, the deep silence of a winter night when all the world sleeps beneath a blanket of snow. And Harry surrendered to that silence, let it fill him and soothe him. He thought of nothing and everything, of small moments and large truths, other people he loved and the person he was becoming. Somewhere in the midst of those thoughts, he crossed the threshold into sleep, his breathing slow and even, his face peaceful in the darkness, his heart at rest. And if he dreamed that night, his dreams were gentle ones of laughter and warmth, of friends gathered close, of a future bright with promise, and of a dark-haired man with grey eyes who smiled at him from across a great distance and whispered words that Harry could not quite hear, but understood nonetheless. I love you. I'm proud of you. Now go and live. May you find such peace in your dreams tonight. Dear listener, may your sleep be deep and restful, and may you wake refreshed and ready to carry on. Good night.